Okay. So I know that it's being heard. Okay, I can hear myself at least. So I'm going to go ahead. And if you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about afterwards, please stick around for the whole thing. So we're going to start on chapter 1 of Sojourner's Path. And I hope you check out the link in the description for the book after we're finished. Chapter 1. Allie sat on her front porch swing looking down the street. A gentle breeze made the trees sway rhythmically, caressing her face. Scents hinted of fresh-cut grass and blossoms she couldn't name. The sun broke through the clouds like a chapel's stained-glass windows. She swung gently, holding a cup of tea. Next to her was a sketchbook with pencils. The drawing utensils rocked with her, just enough to ease onto their sides, showing the brand for a brief moment and then rolling under, like children playing peekaboo. She brought out a book to do some typography with an uplifting phrase. Allie liked positive idioms. Be the good, joy in the journey, grow where you're planted. She found comfort in them. Also, she enjoyed the art of typography, which made marrying the two easy. Her home was full of artistic, homemade signs, akin to the ones sold at farmers markets and street fairs. But today, she was far too enraptured by the sounds, sights, and aromas of the world to need reminders of how to live in it. It was enough just to sit and breathe. These kind of days were distant and few. Much more were deserved in her mind. Allie spent a good portion of the week working with people who couldn't care less about slowing down, too busy trying to become the next Fortune 500 company's junior executive or some such nonsense. Her colleagues hummed through their days like a whirring of fluorescent lights above their heads. Once they started going, they may flicker by a hunger pang or nature's call, but then it was back to the steady, droning pace of work until they switched off at 6 p.m. They didn't exist right now, though. Late spring afforded her the luxury of enjoying the evenings after a long work day. This was her time to relax. Letting her thoughts drift, she yawned and stretched around her back to scratch a small itch. Crack! Allie could feel the tremor in the house as the back door slammed shut. The sudden shock caused her to jolt and spill tea over her lap. She jumped up and started brushing the hot beverage off her jeans as quickly as she could. Glaring back into the house, she heard heavy footsteps cross the threshold. Hey, Allie, you home? Her brother Ty appeared in the front door frame behind the screen. The tea had managed to spill across her upper thigh and down between her legs. Oh, hi. He had a habit of parking around the back of the house, driving through her neighbor's gravel driveway that led up to the property line and coasting over the lawn until he reached her driveway. The continued abuse of the grass left both it and her worn and dejected. Her disappointment and disdain dripped from every word. Hello. Come in. Wow. Hi to you, too. What happened? Allie's little brother looked slightly amused and a little proud of himself as she pushed past him to head upstairs. She wanted to ask him what he was doing there and why he hadn't fixed the back door yet, like he'd promised to so many times. Can I eat this? Allie left some cookies on the kitchen counter she'd meant to bring out onto the porch, but got too distracted and left them. Now in her room upstairs, she wanted nothing more than to shove one of those cookies down his throat. Why are you here? He called back. You know, take that stuff to the thrift store. Where is it? Seriously? She murmured under her breath. He could have stopped in any time this last week, or have when she'd asked 5 or 6 weeks ago. She called out, Basement! Where? Basement! Where in the basement? There was a touch of annoyance in his voice, as if to say, I can't read your mind. Hang on! She zipped her up the fly on a fresh pair of jeans and walked downstairs. Hey, did you remember my sweater? No. He looked bemused. Figures, Allie thought, and rolled her eyes, showing Ty exactly what was on her mind. He rolled them back in reply with a smirk and headed for the basement. As he clomped down the stairs, Allie followed. They reached the bottom, and Ty looked into the abyss of clutter, saying, "So, where is it?" Her eyes searched the room. After an awkward silence, Allie crossed her arms and covered her mouth. She knew she had pulled it out and set it aside for him to take, but that had been when she'd initially asked for his help. Impatience got the better of him, turning on the stairs to glance over his shoulder at Allie. Allie, still covering her mouth in deep thought, broke her concentration briefly to cast her eyes downward and raise her shoulders to her ears. "You don't know? Someone was supposed to pick it up over a month ago." She was clearly indignant. "I tend to forget where I put things after a while to make room for other things, like paying bills and picking up takeout for someone who's sick." Ty didn't go for the barb. She was obviously discontented with his inability to perform the task. "Just point me in a direction." "Try over there." She pointed to a large pile of boxes. They both walked over and started opening box after box, searching for the forgotten thrift store contribution. It was musty, but well lit in the basement. The foundation was made of stones and mortar, which was typical for a home built in the beginning of the 20th century. Her parents had bought the house from an old man who tried to keep it up after his wife had passed, but finally decided it was too much for him alone. She grew up in it and knew every crack and creak in the place, so she didn't mind being in the musty old cellar. There were lots of memories combined with junk stored away. An old blender from the 1980s when their mom decided to make shakes and couldn't find the lid. Ty was so excited he walked up and started pushing buttons. The once blue walls took hours to clean, and they still found spots of dried shake up to the day she left home for college. Allie left the apartment life behind when her mother fell ill, deciding to move back to her childhood home. Really, it wasn't much of a sacrifice. She missed the house, and with no family of her own, just a few bad breakups, she welcomed it. Her mother once said, "The cancer is just a symptom." Dell, Allie's father, died years before. Her mother never remarried and even dated, citing that part of her responsibility was over. But what was clear was her heartache never would be. She missed him terribly, and it showed. There were times it would be hard for her to get out of bed in the mornings, or other times she would wear his clothes just to be near the memory of him. Allie and Ty's mother did her best for them. They never wanted for anything, save the father they all missed. Still, Christmases were happy, summers joyful and fun, and the day-to-day bustle of school and work continued without fail, sprinkled with moments of humor and silliness. Allie and Ty laughed and reminisced for a few hours until Ty finally stood and stretched. "Well, I gotta get home." "I suppose. It's been a while." "Yeah, got stuff to do." Okay. They started back up the stairs. It was disheartening. Probably be another month or two before he'd attempt another run for her to the thrift store. "No, better take care of it yourself." "Listen, don't worry about it. I'll take it in." "How? You can't even lift the box up the stairs." "Oh, really? Just don't worry about it." He stopped. "Well, can you?" "What?" "Lift the box." "Yeah." She put her hands on the small of his back and pushed him up the stairs. "I can take it up a little at a time if I have to. It's fine." "I can see it now. Woman buried under a pile of bric-a-brac. Search dogs released. News at 11. She laughed. "Shut up. You better get out of here. Aren't you meeting Tammy at Schlitz's?" Ty's wife, Tammy, made it their ritual to go out to dinner every Thursday at Schlitz's Supper Club. Their kids, Chloe and Zachary, spent time with Tammy's sister and cousins while they were out. "Is it Thursday?" "Yep." "Then I'd really better move it. Bye, sis. Talk to you later." "'Kay. Say hi to Tammy for me." "Will do." He called from the door. Crack! It went a moment later. "I'll fix that." "You better." "Bye." Allie smiled. Bye, Ty. Cold. So cold. The smell, rancid, burnt, something dead, festering over burning coal. A stench she never witnessed before and could hardly endure. Something died here. Hands instinctively covered her mouth, and she opened her eyes. Nothing. Everything was black. Where am I? She reached out, straining to see just an outline, something. Allie rolled onto her hands and knees and tried to focus her eyes on anything she could. Her own breath, her feet beneath her, something. She shuffled forward, the ground slippery and sharp, crawling through what seemed broken glass until she reached the base of a sharp upward angled piece. Allie felt worse than she'd ever been in her life, shaking from fear and cold and clammy skin. She felt like a parasite on an unwelcome host. Helpless, abandoned, and confused, waves of revulsion passed over her as she desperately searched for an egress. And the smell, it was all over her, permeating her clothing and hair, but it went deeper too, as if it was part of her now. It burned her airways, became part of her soul. She felt around the ground and picked up something hard and heavy. It was sharp, like everything else in the place. She tried to focus her eyes on the object for a clue as to where she was. She didn't like it here. There was nothing familiar or warm about her surroundings. No trees, no grass, nothing reminding her of any place she'd ever been. She'd give anything to see something she could recognize. The environment was so hostile, so horrific. There's nothing alive here. She knew that instinctively. Nothing could live here. There was no sound of birds or animals, no leaves rustling, no water moving, just the cold and the smell and the jagged rocks, like little nicks of razors cutting into her. The worst part was she was ravenous. The repulsed and sickened, there was a hunger that demanded satisfaction. I'm starving. Starving. Food. She started putting things in her mouth. Anything she could pick up, she'd chew on and swallow. The wind started blowing her hair back. She had thought perhaps this new development would rid her of the noxious odor, but instead it shot the foul air right into her nostrils. It was cold, starting small, but then it started building and building like an air raid siren. It grew into a deafening sound as debris flew and collided into other things. For the first time, she forgot about her hunger and started to panic. It was as if the air was being sucked out by a typhoon. Allie turned towards the direction it was coming from, unable to open her eyes. What good would it do? It was still pitch black. She turned away. Allie grabbed frantically at anything that was around her. Agonizing pain seized her as she wove fingers around and into sharp grooves of the structure in front of her. She was being pummeled by objects from every direction. Please stop. Please end. But there was no stopping it, and no seeming end to it. Just the noise and the pain and the force of it all. Allie's body was being contorted and pulled like a rag. Her hands felt slippery. Blood. Oh, God, blood! It became increasingly difficult to hang on to her lifeline. It was a fight between the urge to suckle the blood off her fingers and the desperation to cling to this only stability. She knew it wouldn't be much longer, and she'd lose her grasp. No, no, no! Twisting and kicking her legs, she tried desperately to bring them down around the object she was hanging on to. The strength of the cyclone above her head had reached its full potential, and she grunted and strained every muscle to keep holding on. She released a cry of anguish as she tried one last desperate attempt to secure herself to the structure. There was nothing she could do. Slowly, one by one, her fingers lost their will to hang on. Dear God, help me. Allie sat bolt upright in bed. Her hands found her way to her face, rubbing her eyes. They were sticky and wet, but her hands weren't cut. She'd been crying. She felt her legs. Nothing there, just sore. Her body felt like she'd run a marathon. Allie groaned and sighed, looking around the room. Sheets were tangled around her. The nightstand lost all but one item. The rest were on the floor. What a nightmare. She pulled the covers off and turned to get out of bed. Using the wall to stabilize herself, she headed downstairs. The dream was playing back, fractured in her mind. She remembered way too much of it to function in the moment. She was so lost and scared. She needed to get perspective, let it go. The stairway in Allie's house was long with a small landing at the bottom, which turned 90 degrees. With some effort, she navigated the stairs and walked through the dining room towards her small open kitchen. She needed a cup of tea, something soothing and sweet, something to help her forget, or at least stop her heart from beating so fast. She grabbed her favorite porch mug from the cupboard and turned on the sink. The electric kettle was such a fast, convenient tool at a time like this. She filled it with water and flipped the switch to turn it on. Now it was an easy decision of which tea. The cupboard was full with tea. The cupboard with the tea was to the left of the kettle. She knew just the one to fill her spirit with calm. Rose. It was such an easy decision that she'd already pushed the orange pekoe and Earl Grey aside, pulled out the box of rose tea, and gotten a bag. She looked at her prize. A warm smile curled upon her lips. The kettle boiled and switched off automatically. Allie filled a mug and dropped in the tea, letting it steep. Meanwhile, the sugar was plucked from its haven, as well as a spoon from the silver drawer. She stirred the teaspoon of the sweet granules into the warm vessel, sighing again. The first sip washed over her taste buds, a tidal wave of warmth and comfort, the hot liquid snuffing out most of the dread about returning to sleep. Why couldn't I have dreamt about an Irishman with dark hair and green eyes? Why didn't I get that? She shuffled to an overstuffed recliner, being careful not to spill her beverage, and squished herself deeply into its enveloping arms. She tried to think of the possibilities of what a dream involving an Irishman would entail. Strong arms, sweet laugh, penetrating eyes, and smart. Oh, he had to be smart. Setting, a cafe or bistro. A chance encounter. It should be engaging. Cataloging his every feature, she imagined simple quirks he may have. He liked the sound of crickets and playing with children. He was, of course, kind, sincere, charitable, and a little bit cocky. She liked the thought of fighting with him, getting a taste of the Irish temper. But it was exactly what she needed at the moment, a distraction without being taxing or unpleasant. The tea tasted just as she remembered, refreshing and sweet. She wasn't a honey girl, as the aftertaste bothered her. Allie liked to drink most tea the English way if she could, with sugar and a drop of cream, though rose tea didn't call for the dairy. She continued to sip, as all the while thinking of this tempestuous yet altruistic Irishman. However, the nightmare would not be drowned out. It crept through Allie's psyche and wove itself in and out of her thoughts, coiling around anything it could. She closed her eyes and concentrated on her fantasy while taking more sips of tea here and there. But the memories weren't dissipating. In fact, they were really growing, feeling more realistic and constricting. She could now physically feel the cold. The hair on her skin was starting to stand up, and her mouth felt chalky and dry. The hunger, the all-consuming, desperate hunger threatening to consume her all by itself. The sensations were a weight or pressure compounding on her. It became difficult to breathe. She was sweating. Her hand brushed back the hair falling in her face. Her tresses were soaked. Skin felt clammy. The room might be moving, slightly to the left, then to the right. Her fingers were numb now, and her lips chapped. Her breath caught in her chest. A stitch was developing in her side. That place, that horrible place. She could smell it, knew the stench. She couldn't breathe. It was squeezing her. Allie was wheezing when she opened her eyes. Her shaking spilt the tea onto the floor. The accident brought her back to the here and now. She stood cautiously, trying to regain balance. The wet feeling was a welcome interruption. Pajamas washed easily. The grandfather clock told her it had only been a couple minutes. She was sure it was much longer. But what was real? Was she awake? Standing, she searched the room for a sign she was still dreaming, shaken to her core. It's one thing to dream it, an entirely different thing to live it. She found a towel in the kitchen. Her breathing became steady, but Allie couldn't stop herself from shaking yet. If the dream could manifest itself so deeply in her mind, how could she know what was reality? Don't think about it. Clean yourself up. Tomorrow. Think about it tomorrow. There was nothing else to be done tonight. No point in sleeping either. The warm glow of the television, with its blissful, numbing touch, helped shift her focus off her anxious mind. And that is the end of chapter 1. I hope that you guys really, really enjoyed it. That is the first chapter of Sojourner's Path. The novel is available already on Amazon for print. However, the ebook is cheaper, and that's coming out. Sunday. So you can pick it up Sunday, but you can pre-order it now. So if you're interested in picking it up, please go ahead and get out there, and hopefully you will enjoy the book. And let me know how you enjoyed this. I really would love to hear your thoughts, and if you have any questions or anything else going on. Okay, well, let's see. Does anybody have any questions or anything going on? Not at this time. Of course, there is a delay. There's a lapse in the recording to when I'm finished recording. So it's okay. All right. Okay. Well, that's okay. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I hope that you join me for the next reading. I'm going to try to keep this up either every week or just through part 1 so that you get a good taste for the book. And otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed the reading. This is chapter 1 of Sojourner's Path. Bye.